Welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to today's Q&A and our first return back to live streaming on Twitch. Hopefully it's going to be the first of many streams. Everyone can hear us all okay? Lots of hellos. All right, wonderful. So I'm Siege. I'm the community manager for Squad. Many of you have seen me around inside of Discord or maybe some other places. And today we have Baron, our lead game designer, who you will definitely have also seen. Baron loves to jump in on Reddit and then Discord as well whenever he gets the opportunity. We also have Howitzer, our senior producer. So the three of us today are going to do our best to answer as many of the questions that we collected from inside of Discord this time around. I know last time we did our Q&A collection through Steam. But using Discord allowed us to actually select a whole bunch of questions which had higher upvotes. But we didn't choose just the high upvote ones. We've got a great selection of questions to get through today. I think everyone's going to be very excited. So, no, the big J, Carm's not with us today, but I'm sure he would love to join us another day. We will have to figure that out for another stream. All right, everyone. So we're just going to jump right into the first questions that we have all set up. And we're going to start with the first topic of games and systems. And the first question I have for you guys today is something that I've seen quite a lot, and I'm sure you guys have seen quite a lot. It's like questions about features like fast ropes have been asked for quite a bit. Would we ever see features like this, or even like paratroopers jumping from a heli? What do we think?
You want to go, Oliver?
Sure. The squad team always talks about this kind of stuff, specifically fast ropes, as it's a long sort of talked about and wanted feature. And I think, like all the features and gameplay stuff we talk about, we have to prioritize it with a lot of other different things. We want to get to it. I know we want to get to it. I don't know, Alex, if you want to talk a little bit more about where that might sit in with game design, but
fast rope specifically?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, no, unfortunately that's a tough one. So probably not imminent, but I mean it's something that gets us excited when we talk about it. But yeah, when we have the time to focus on something like that, yeah, that's another question.
Awesome. And I mean, I know we talked before this, before we went live, over yesterday and stuff. Squad's been around for 10 years at this point, and we want to make sure that it stays around for another 10 years. So a lot of the features and game stuff that we'll be bringing to the game is just as long as it aligns with the game's future, you'll see some really great stuff over the next coming years.
Yeah, whatever it might be, content or features, we want Squad to be around for another 10 years or more. So there'll be plenty more features and content to come.
So one of the other things that came up was, and this is something that apparently was teased about 8 years ago. The community was wondering if we were ever going to see the FGM 148 Javelin, because it was teased a long time ago, and everyone says that they're still waiting for it.
I guess I'll talk about Javelin specifically. Yeah, no plans for it to come in immediately. Obviously, the big challenge there for anyone who knows how it works is that it's a specifically top attack anti-tank guided missile system, which makes it really difficult to balance because it is essentially a real-world delete key for armored vehicles because it hits them in the top where they're least protected. So we've talked about it in the past and we've toyed around the idea with maybe making it an emplaced weapon so that at least it has the trade-off of not being a portable weapon for infantry, so that it has a static position and it has that trade-off. But yeah, still not something we're planning anytime soon. Got
Yeah.
a lot of other stuff to get through.
Whenever something like a Javelin comes into play and it's too hard to balance, there's definitely questions that need to be answered, and the gameplay itself has to be protected as best as possible. But that kind of leads us into another question that came in, where who was it asked this? It was Crowl4 said, will there ever be any CAS helis in the future? And if so, when?
Okay. Yeah, I thought we were gonna wait a little later to answer that one, but
that's a good point. We can come back to it. I think we can
Sure.
let everyone simmer on that for a few moments. I just read the note that we have on that reveal at end. Okay, so another question that came in from the Annoying Devil. We were asked if it is possible to increase the number of players per server. So for example, make 110 players or even 128. And basically, were there any technical limitations to that?
I think there's potentially two sides. There's one side, the tech stuff, and the other side is balance. A little less so on the balance side, but because we have huge maps that kind of can cover a lot of ground for adding players. But the tech side is where we sort of see the most work or unknowns really. We really just have to see what happens, right? If we increase that limit and what happens to the server performance and all this kind of stuff. The more players we add, the more replication everyone else has to do. So there's not necessarily a limitation per se, but it's just unknowns on what would happen to server performance if we do go above that number.
Yeah, I mean, on the design side at least, we'd love to push and see how far we can go with player numbers. But the reality is, optimization is our, probably one of our biggest challenges. So making any decision that has the potential to make it worse, even a little bit, the more decisions like that you make, it's just going to keep piling up and piling up. So yeah, it's probably not the right time for that. But when we have more opportunity to focus on optimization and get things performing better, then we can start thinking about pushing that limit.
Yeah, there's a whole section on optimization, and I see in the chat lots of people asking for optimization.
Yes.
While it would be cool to add, 10, 20 more players to matches, performance might not like it.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, just as Howitzer said, we do have an entire section of questions based on balance and optimization. I do just want to cut the questions for a moment and just kind of mention that chat, we got to keep everything in English, please, because unfortunately, myself, Baron, and Howitzer are only able to read through English in the chat today, and it's just for everybody else as well. So please, let's keep it to English today specifically. Thank you very much, everyone. Wonderful. Let's move on. So we had another question about the M7A3 and the powerful optics that were kind of put on it. And we're wondering if they'll ever be added to the game, as currently they have no purpose, but they could be a great testing bed for thermals or other improved or new optic systems to squad. I guess
Yeah,
You
I
take that
can.
one.
I can take this one. So I'll just talk about what our immediate intent is with that, and then what we might be able to do with it in the future that not solid. So the intent for all of the recon vehicles is that we want to give commander the ability to uh, hook in and possess like the commander camera for recon vehicles. A lot of these vehicles in real life actually have a specific sensor module that allows you to do this. So on the Coyote, for example, it has a giant antenna mast that actually comes out of the back. Unfortunately, that requires a lot of effort to go and model and animate all that stuff for all the different reconnaissance vehicles in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So for now, it'll likely just be giving the commander the ability to kind of hook into that commander camera on the vehicle for the recon vehicles. So they'll be able to sit there and scroll through cameras and get live updates from wherever the reconnaissance vehicles are positioned. So that's kind of our immediate intent with the reconnaissance vehicles. But yeah, in the future, as it relates to thermals, we know vehicles are in a position where they're really strong right now. So we don't want to make any decisions that are going to push that further and make it become a bigger problem. But in the future, something we've toyed around with is adding thermals, but maybe only to the commander seats,
Right.
and only when that commander seat doesn't have like a weapon system. So in the case of like a main battle tank that has a remote weapon station on the top, we might give them thermals, but you can't use it at the same time as you're using the weapon system. And that would be so that we're introducing that capability, but we're also increasing the amount of teamwork and coordination between that commander and the gunner or the driver. So the commander has the ability to see targets more easily with the thermals, but not necessarily the gunner. And that information has to be relayed from the commander to the gunner. And we think that that implementation like supports our pillars a little bit better than just straight up giving these vehicle weapon stations the ability to put on thermals.
Balance, 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 right? It's one of those things that everything has to be taken into consideration. Let's move on to the next question. I think this one's going to be a bit of a shorter answer, if I remember correctly. But is a vehicle damage system similar to Squad 44 currently being worked on? And by the way, anyone who maybe doesn't know about Squad 44, you should absolutely go check it out on Steam. They are getting a very great update. I think it actually released today. I think it may be released today. You should definitely give it a check. If you enjoy Squad, you will enjoy Squad 44. But yes, vehicle damage system to Squad 44.
The short answer is no, I suppose. But
Yeah.
now that Squad 44 is kind of part of our Offloads catalog, we're always looking at how Squad 44 is doing things, what they do differently, if we can take and borrow from what they do. Some more interesting things might come later down the road based on that. But
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say there's some cues we can take from certain things they do. But like bringing that whole system in, unfortunately, no, they deviated way too far, and trying to go back and replace our current system with that one across like 70, 80 vehicles, and we're not even talking about vehicle variants, just the base vehicles.
Yeah.
That would be an absolutely insane amount of work, unfortunately.
Right.
As cool as that would be, because their system is very nice. Yeah, we'll have to pick and choose smaller things that they're doing that we can replicate. But yeah, unfortunately, we won't be able to take that system entirely.
Wonderful. And just for chat, just remember that we're currently going through selected questions from the Discord. So the people that are asking questions in chat, they're not going to get answered just yet. However, at the very end of the stream, we're going to take a little bit of time to try and answer some questions that come up in chat. So if you would like to save your specific questions for then, please stick around and we'll get to them as soon as we can. Okay, this is a question on an Insurgency rework. This player was wondering if there's any plans to rework the game mode to try and make it popular again.
Yes, I guess yes, there are plans with a few other of the other things that we've spoken about. It's always a question of when and the resources that we have working on stuff currently. It is on our roadmap at some point, not this year, but it's something that we want to get back to, and or game modes in general is something we want to get back to eventually, and rework old ones, add new ones, that kind of thing. So that's just another thing that the team in Offload talks a lot about and gets excited about.
Awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to do with some of our more neglected game modes. That if anyone's familiar with the game, they know what they are. Yeah, Insurgency was a big one that the design team is really passionate about redoing. But yeah, kind of like Otzer said, things get moved around and reprioritized a lot, so we haven't been able to work directly on it yet, but hopefully in the near future.
Absolutely. Wonderful. And the CM player actually had another question, and Baron, you actually kind of touched on this a little bit already. He asked about any new potential command assets and what they may look like. They mentioned things like the artillery and the airstrike, but will there be any new categories or new features?
Sure, yeah. Okay. So I'll talk about our intents here and like when this happens and how they might change when we get to actually work on them. Just be advised that may change. So our
Right.
intent is to rework the commander entirely at some point in the not too distant future. What we want to see there is every battle group's commander has a totally different range of tactical and strategic abilities that they can use. Most likely they'll have to unlock them, kind of like a tech tree, as the round progresses, and they'll have to use resources to call them in. So that's kind of our intent. What all those different commander abilities look like, that's really going to come down to what we can reasonably do for the MVP of that when we get to it. But you know, pretty much what you would imagine. Lots of different airstrikes, different types of artillery, maybe different types of passive abilities. So maybe the commander is able to unlock a special role for the team that they don't have until that point, or they can unlock additional vehicle spawns, maybe one-time vehicle spawns for particularly powerful vehicles, maybe supply drops, maybe giving their team extra tickets, maybe giving their team the ability to capture points quicker. Maybe certain factions have abilities to things like a mass wave spawn on their position. So yeah, we have a giant brainstorm of all the things we'd like to do. And actually, a lot of these were brainstormed at the time the commander went in, but the scope had to just be cut down so much that we ended up with where we are now. So yeah, we really want to correct that in the future and flesh that system out more properly. But like I said, we're not close to starting on that yet. So how much it's going to differ from the stuff I just talked about to what you'll see when it's ready, there could be some variance.
Absolutely. But it's great. I think the community love to hear whenever there's like awesome conversations like that happening internally. It allows them to know that we're what kind of path we want to take, whether that's what we end up being able to do or not. I think they'll love to hear it. And let's see, what else have we got here? We're running towards the end of our questions inside of games and systems. But there was a question about a local teammate radar and if we would ever add something like that. They mentioned that team kills have always been an issue, and they think that they think it's quite easy to, in certain scenarios to mix up friend and foe, and it just sometimes goes with the territory. And I know that I have been that person where I'll stare blankly at the person in front of me, wondering if I'm wearing the same uniform as them or not, and then I'll often get shot before I get to shoot. Um, but they had some examples of what some other games have maybe used, and I think we did have some thoughts of um, features that we had talked about, maybe not specifically a local teammate radar, but some other ideas.
Yeah, we talk about this kind of stuff all the time. Things that will help like new players or even old players just with the experience in general. Um, and this isn't exactly on the roadmap at all, but just an idea, I guess, to get so you guys get an idea of the kinds of things that we talk about. Um, we've spoken about some sort of tactical overlay that's toggleable on or off to help with these sorts of things, whether it be where your friendlies are or where objectives are. The thing with that would be obviously balancing it so that people using it or not using it would they wouldn't get an advantage. But this kind of stuff we talk about all the time.
Right, because the optimization, sorry, the balance of the game is paramount. Like we already know that players, like friendly fire can happen, right? But it in a lot of cases, once you kind of spend more time in the game, you do get past that friendly fire option. I don't think I've killed a teammate in a little while, at least myself. However, adding something like that, it's all important to make sure that the balance of the game is not too skewed.
And then there's if we add sort of new features or we sort of rework older features, because the compass with its various different icons on already exist as well. So then it becomes a balance of do we rework that, spend some time on that, or add this whole other thing. Lots of different ways we could do things like that.
I think the important thing there is to acknowledge that it is somewhat of a problem, and we'll continue to work on addressing uh, the friendly fire or the identification issue. Just not saying that we can't make progress on that using the tools that we already have, but we're also not dismissing maybe doing some new things or thinking outside the box there. But for something like a radar, it's probably going to be a hard no, because one of the big strong points of our games that are supported by our pillars is that we want to keep things immersive and authentic. That has to be balanced against making the game approachable and kind of trying to bridge that gap in the niche where our game fits. So there's always going to be like a meeting point between authenticity and what's good for the experience. So that one I think would probably be too far on the side of something that's a little too gamey versus something that's authentic. But yeah,
Absolutely.
we'll keep looking at that.
Poncho made a
I'll-
good point in chat. He mentioned if friendlies are shooting at you, they aren't friendly. So just remember that, everybody. And then our last question inside of the games and systems category, we had a player asking us, Amaris, about a scoreboard or an endgame stats overhaul. We're wondering if we have a vision at Offworld with an endgame scoreboard or like an after action report.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that, and then maybe Baron can talk a bit about it too. But there's a general sort of gameplay loop that we wanted to help improve and address in Squad. And many of you already know, you join a server, you play matches, you get your scoreboard the way it is right now. And before voting, you were sort of into the next match. So part of where this sort of fits in and where voting fits in is addressing this sort of gameplay loop of new players joining a match, and with voting, hopefully knowing a little bit more about what map they're playing, what faction they're playing, and what faction they're playing against before they jump into the match. And that was sort of one piece of trying to improve that loop. And the second piece, maybe I'll hand over to Baron now, which is this a better scoreboard after action report.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. And I think the person who asked this question actually linked to me teasing people in Reddit. So yeah, I'm in there sometimes, and I'm gonna tease, and people reply to it. Just so you know, I don't look at the replies. I don't know why I do that to myself. So just so you know, but yeah, so we're working on creating the proper after action report, which will be much more detailed and informative than the current scoreboard, which is really not great as part of that um, feedback uh, feedback point in the gameplay loop. So at the end of the gameplay loop, the player should get feedback and let them know, like, how did I do, and that sort of thing. In our game, because we focus on the group rather than the individual, we want to take that feedback and apply it to the whole team. So the team will be able to see where their ticket losses were. Did you lose too many vehicles? What types of vehicles did you lose? Did you lose too many radios? This is how many you lost, and this is all the tickets that you lost on that, so that the team collectively can get a better picture of how things went. We think this is really important because if you're in an individual squad and you're just you're living your own little story within that bigger round of gameplay, and then the match just ends and you see those flags at the end to see who won, and you're just like, oh, okay. Like, sometimes it's expected and sometimes it's not expected, and you only get a little piece of that picture of what happened. So hopefully this will shed light on a lot of that bigger picture of how the round went for your team. Yeah, that'll be coming in the near future.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I had a great game with I can't remember his name the other day, but it was myself, and he was a fire team lead as a medic, but he decided that the two of us should go hunting radios, and we took down 2 radios on Goro without the enemy team catching us. And I would love to be able to see that kind of information, that I cost the enemy 20 tickets versus seeing my actual kills, which was 0 in that game, but I did know that I had done something to help, even though we lost. All right, so we're going to move on to the balance and optimization section. And I want to preface this very first question here, guys, and this is for the chat, everyone watching. I'm going to mention ICO, and this is going to be probably the only time that you'll hear us mentioning it on a stream or kind of going forward, because ICO happened in version 6 or 6.0, isn't that correct? And we have just released 8.0. We've moved past the infantry combat overhaul, and we are now at a point where we're talking more about things like player movement, weapon handling, and weapon sway and all of those things as separate entities. So going forward, you can clip this and you can send it to all your buddies, and I will be doing the same. I'll be clipping it, and anytime someone asks me about ICO or ICO or infantry combat overhaul, I'll be saying from now on we will be talking about the balancing of individual weapons or weapon sway and weapon handling as individual pieces, if that makes sense. And I think that this question should also then help with everyone understanding that a little bit more. So, ICO felt a little bit like a direct nerf to infantry, with effects felt in changes to player movement, weapon handling, and even things like leaning being affected. It felt like there was nothing positive to balance it out, and the player was then wondering if there's any plans to include any new features for infantry, like weapon resting to reduce recoil, or being able to switch shoulders. And maybe even other things like crouch height adjustments, which would also be nice. Sometimes, you get height overboard when you're in a second floor window trying to shoot down onto the ground floor. Some questions like that. So, as I said, we're now moving on and we're making these things about weapon handling, but I believe Baron or Howitzer maybe have some comments on this topic.
Yeah, I can start off. Like since we released 6.0, I think basically every update since then we've been continuing to tweak handling for specific guns and weapon archetypes. So we're still looking and monitoring how all the different weapons play, and how you guys play with them all. And that stuff won't really stop. We'll always kind of be bouncing here and there, how things handle, and also looking at features like part of the question there, the bracing and things like that. So breaking it up into handling and sway and all this kind of different features will help us balance things the way we want to balance the weapons and how we want the game to play out. And I guess before handing off to Baron, we're kind of squad's almost 10, almost 10. So we're kind of looking at how we can set the groundwork for another 10 years, as the FPS market and gaming in general is sort of changing. So too will squad, even next year, the year after that, to kind of keep relevant and make sure that we have another 10 years for ourselves. So that's a lot of things there, but yeah, it's going to be a constant sort of game balancing thing now. So
yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that question. Okay, so I'll try to go through kind of point by point. Yeah, there's still pain points, and iteration never stops on this sort of thing. So we don't ever expect to be done and everything is perfect. So we know there's pain points with particular weapon archetypes hip firing, or particular weapons handling or recoil, and that's stuff that'll continually get addressed and iterated on. The other part about new mechanics with crouch height, I'll take crouch height first. So that's an interesting one, but I know what kind of problem I think we're pointing towards to, which is that a lot of the times in the game, you'll come to a windowsill or a wall or something, and it's just a little bit too high for you to like properly bipod or properly poke your weapon out of. So when I look at how we solve that problem, I don't think necessarily, uh, the first thing that I can think of, oh, crouch height adjustment, then I get over that. Okay, that's what we want to do. But maybe there's a simpler way to solve that problem. So maybe it's an environment issue. So maybe we redo some of those environment assets so that these windowsills, don't have collision maybe on the little cross pieces of wood in them, or maybe they're lower towards the ground. Or, we have the ability to go through our levels and measure all those metrics to make sure that we don't run into these instances where things are too offset from the player. So that's how I might think about solving that particular problem. Then these, the other, like getting more into crouch adjustment and switching shoulders on weapons, that gets into much more of kind of like the milsim territory side of things, which I'm not saying we'll never do and that it wouldn't add value to our game, but We do try to keep things as simple as possible and only do those kind of things where they're addressing a problem that we identify that absolutely has to be solved. So just so that we're not overcomplicating things for the sake of making it realistic. Again, kind of going back to that, balancing the authenticity against what's good for the experience and making sure that experience is approachable for a wide variety of players.
Yeah, that sliding scale of balance versus realism versus kind of enjoyability is hard to kind of make the right compromises on sometimes. I think then there was now, what was the question? Yes, we mentioned kind of privately before this stream started. We wanted to kind of talk on the because this I guess comes into the weapon handling versus the FPS issue that players have been experiencing over the last while. Um, we just wanted to say really quickly that we are still working on a resolution that is going to be as good as we can possibly make it for the FPS issue. So like if your FPS is lower, your frames per second, that is, if your frames per second are lower, your gun sway or your gun handling can be very different versus a high FPS or high frames per second. The team are working extremely hard. We just don't want to put anything in half baked. So a little bit more time. We do appreciate your patience with all of it. So we'll get there as soon as we possibly can. The next question inside of the balance and optimization category was regarding Unreal Engine 5 or FSR3. Wondering what the long-term plans are for Squad in terms of engine upgrades. This player understood that you can't just take everything as it is right now and just plop it into a new engine. But is it even feasible?
I think most of the crowd here knows that we've been doing engine upgrades, I guess, since the beginning. And I'm not too much of a tech guy. Perhaps we can get some more streams in the future where we kind of dive into more detail on the tech side of things. But new engines are always something we, I guess, look at. Kind of viability, what they bring to us, what shiny new tools Epic in this case is working on. So it's always something we're kind of looking at and either working on, kind of playing around in the background with to figure out how easy or hard it might be. Yeah.
Wonderful. All right. Another question inside of that was from an admin, like a server admin standpoint. Have we any opportunity to invest in some more admin tools, things for them to do, like lock in on first person or on vehicles, and have even maybe like a pointer or laser showing where the player is aiming at? There was a couple of different features I think that maybe came up with recently with Moydog's tournament, and the helmet cams and stuff like that. I think maybe brought up this question from some of the more active admins and server owners.
Sure. Did you want to take that on, Baron? I know you were involved with the helmet cam and some of the tools that Moydog has.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. So officially, we don't really have the bandwidth or the resources to get into these things, honestly. There's a lot of things we're trying to get done, and we have a finite amount of resources. So anytime we work on something, it's an opportunity cost, which means we can't work on something else. And that is going to push all these things we want to do back even further. So for that kind of stuff, that was just like a side project for me and some other dev team members. We just did that in our spare time. That wasn't on company time, just because we wanted to help out with some of that stuff. I get it. I admined a server for years before I ever joined the dev team, so I know what the limitations of the tools are, and I know that there's a lot more that can be done, and there's frustration points in there that can be solved. But yeah, not don't expect any big pushes or efforts around that in the near future, so we can start getting through some of our backlog of not just like features we want to do, but tech debt and bugs that have to be fixed and that sort of thing.
And then the last question inside of this category is directly about optimization. The question is, are you planning to make Squad more playable by optimizing graphics? A lot of people are complaining about having low FPS with a good PC. But I also just kind of want to comment on this one before the two of you get in on it at any point. There's been an awful lot of information that I've been trying to gather inside of Discord and so on, where people mention their their quality or their FPS and stuff like that being lower. And yes, we fully understand that with every update, it feels sometimes like there are problems with optimization or for players like kind of FPS or the quality, having to drop quality so they can get more FPS or not being able to get any more, period. And it seems to be quite like all over the place with that information. I'm seeing an awful lot of like older systems struggling, which is kind of understandable. Now, Squad, as we said before, there it is reaching 10 years old, but the game is not the same as it was 10 years ago whenever it was first released. The requirements and the graphic quality and everything, you can go back and you can see pictures, is not anywhere near the same game. Maps are bigger. The amount of meshes and quality and everything is higher. So the requirements on the game are higher. Now, saying that, do we always want to make sure that the game is as playable as possible by absolutely everybody? Of course we do. I don't know the technical aspects of that, but I can tell you for a fact that the team are always looking to try and find ways to put that into updates in any possible way that they can, as well as making sure that all of the content kind of comes along with that at the same time.
Put it really well there.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't
I had been
know.
thinking about this one. It's one of those things that, I see it come up so often in Discord, and it's frustrating, right? Because it's as a player, we all experience these things in any of the games that we play. And sometimes as a developer for you guys, like I'm sure it's frustrating that whenever the updates go out and you potentially see a lot of people saying, oh, optimization, the game's not running as well, but then you realize that all of the content, all of the great stuff that's been added is almost getting forgotten about. We just kind of want to make sure that we let you know that no development team ever in any game, never mind just Squad, is wanting their game to be playable by less people. There's always the want and the hope that we can push forward, making it as good as possible. But it's not always that easy. It's not as easy as I'm making it sound, so.
And engine upgrades, might hold the gold for certain things that we can utilize in new engine upgrades that help us in that as well. But of course, we have to get to that particular engine version, and then we have to actually utilize those tools to be able to help us there. And just like with balancing, weapon balancing, we're constantly looking at piecemealing this kind of stuff too. It's something that may or may not have, I guess, gone overlooked is last December we improved a lot of VRAM memory issues.
Right.
So there was a huge effort by all the teams that we have here to kind of set up textures and materials and visual effects, I guess, properly within the engine. So there's like all these different smaller things. That one was a larger one in particular that we're doing sort of over time to try and, I guess, hack away at these problems overall.
Awesome. And I think that'll end the balance and optimization category of the Q&A. I'm just conscious of our time as well here. So let's move on to worlds. We only have a couple of questions inside of the worlds category. A question that came in from Cobra was wondering about map control and weather. Wondering if we would ever consider adding a system to select weather and time conditions to maps or layers to go along with like the map voting and rotation cycles.
So yeah, the world's questions we don't have Zeno here, so maybe in the future we can do a stream with him and we can get through a lot of world's questions. We've talked
Absolutely.
about this a lot. One thing we know for sure is we don't want to add this as part of the voting process because that just bloats that how long that whole process takes between rounds. And even though server owners can configure how long they want each step in that process to take, we don't want to add lots and lots of steps for them there. So we have talked about potentially enabling server owners to just allow a random lighting condition or weather to be loaded into a map when they go into it. but that's still kind of far off. We still need to get a lot of other things out of the way, like standardizing our lighting conditions. Like for me, it still drives me crazy in the game when on certain lighting levels for certain maps, you have these really dark black shadows at the bottom of a bush or in the corner of a room that someone can just hide in and camp, and you really don't have any counter to it. It's just like they either shoot you and you know they're there, or they don't shoot you and you don't know they're there. It's not very it's not a smooth experience. So, we need to standardize all that stuff across the board. There's also, certain maps that the lighting is such that I don't know, everything just looks too bright and looks too washed out. So there's some standardization we have to do there with the lighting and the weather layers, as well as making sure that certain weather layers don't tax performance even more than others. So I think in the
Right.
past we had like rainy layers, and you just see your FPS tank on those ones. So there's some other problems we have to solve before we can get to the point of considering setting up alternates and then letting those alternates be selected.
Wonderful. All right. And then the other question inside of this is actually something we didn't get to talk about one other thing that came up on this, but the question is wondering if it would be able to add topographic lines or height coloring in the maps. Now, I know this is something we had talked about and said that resources are always a struggle to get things like that changed for all of our maps. However, I saw a community created. Let's see if I can find it really quickly. Someone created a
So,
maps.
for our calculator.
Yeah, for the calculator. It was squadcalc.app. Amazing kind of community made tool that does have like topographic maps and so on. Although yes, it's a web-based product and not built directly into the game. It's still very cool. Very cool to see that it's something that people can make.
Yeah, falls on that question we keep falling back on. I guess the people we have working on things that I guess we deem priority or need to get done first. But it's again like the maps team talk about this a lot. I've been in conversations with lots of people about different sort of displays and maps and overlays and all that kind of stuff for I guess different types of players, using them in different ways. But yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot internally. I think for where our game sits on that scale of milsim to approachable, we probably wouldn't ever want to have topographic maps on by default. So we'd want to keep more of a player friendly mini map. But that's not to say we couldn't have the option to turn on an overlay for topographic maps for the people who really want to have that information, which is probably going to be uh, players who have been around for a while, who are veterans that want to use that information to get some gameplay advantages. So yeah, it's difficult to justify doing that when there's a lot of other priorities. So I'm not saying we'll never do it. There's lots of people on the team who want to do it. So it's just a question of where there's a gap between working on other things, or yeah, if someone gets really passionate enough to prototype something in their own time, that maybe we can get some momentum behind.
Wonderful. All right, and then that ends the worlds category. We didn't have too many things that we could chat about there, but we will, as mentioned before, hopefully have more of these streams, maybe even about specific topics instead of just a Q&A, where we can bring in more of the dev team, talk specifically about the bigger categories like worlds. So we're going to move on to factions, and we have a couple of questions in here. Now, the majority of the questions we can probably break down into a who do we plan on adding in the future, and are there any factions that we plan on adding but don't currently have on the roadmap? Because the questions here, I can tell you, include when are you going to update the British faction? When are we getting a Nordic faction? When are we getting the Ukrainian faction? In terms of realism versus gameplay, it's like, what are the plans for more game design and more vehicles, more factions, more, there's an awful lot of, which factions are we going to get?
Yeah, these are good questions. Think we could probably start off with, I guess, factions in from a country perspective, or along with maps, like squads largest pieces of content. They take the most amount of work, the most amount of departments to work on all these different moving pieces for countries specifically. With the advent of voting and that feature, that sort of allowed us to get a little bit more granular with these countries. The battle groups that Baron has sort of spoken about a bunch. So, because whole countries are massive pieces of work, we still want to be able to bring sort of new countries to Squad. I can't tell you how many pitches that we have that Baron and the design team has come for all these different factions. Everything that's on our question sheet, there's a pitch for basically. So it's just a case of picking what makes sense for us to make first, what that order is and why. As I guess a quick example, the Chinese play base is really big, and they didn't have a home sort of faction, and a lot of assets that we had were from PLA. So we sort of went that route to try and service that player group. We're kind of going with the same mindset with all these other country factions. We want to service these player bases that play Squad more with their home country's faction. It just comes down to time, really. These factions, from a country's perspective, are the largest and longest pieces of content for us. So I know from a smaller perspective, the battle groups, the factions that we have already, are constantly being looked at and balanced and figured out how we can add sort of new battle groups to help balance that faction out. And you've been seeing that already with the 8.0 update, with some of the new battle groups for TLF and USA and Russian ground forces. So that kind of battle group balance will always sort of happen too. But
yeah, there's basically no shortage of factions we want to add, or vehicles or equipment for existing factions that we want to add. Like, the list is pretty much endless. In fact, out of all the different suggestions I see on Reddit and Steam and Discord, maybe like 1 out of 100 times it's something that we haven't thought of. All that stuff lives on a big list of stuff we want to do, but it all just comes down to like priorities and resources. So it's kind of like Outzer said, we're going to try to focus on some of our bigger player bases that don't have representation in the game first. But while we're doing that, whenever we have a gap in production where we can squeeze in a new weapon or a new vehicle or something to that effect, then we'll try to do that. And especially updating some of the older factions. Like, I think the British faction question is probably like the best out of all of those, because yeah, they're pretty neglected. So we have a lot of ideas there for stuff we want to do, but it's just a question of when we have the time and resources to do it. Unfortunately, sorry, all my answers are going to sound the same. They're all going to sound like that, but basically that's what I deal with all day is trying to prioritize and plan and help figure out where this stuff is going to fall in, because we just have such a big backlog of features and content and things that we want to get done for the game.
Wonderful. Yeah, it was Pack in Discord who asked about when the British faction are going to get updated, so I'm sure he will be happy to hear that that's one of the factions that we're intending on updating as soon as we can. Now, this isn't on my question sheet, but I was wondering, do we want to tell everybody which faction is coming next?
PMC, we already announced it, right? So that's an easy one.
We did. Now, are we able to then maybe bring that on to the question that I accidentally asked at the very beginning that we wanted to mention at the end? You remember my question about CAS helis?
Right, yeah, okay, cool. So yeah, let's just say it. CAS helis and anti-aircraft weapons and anti-aircraft countermeasures are coming. So we're just at the front end of that production cycle for working on that. And depending on how things go, we might hit our anticipated delivery date, or it might get pushed back a little bit. So I don't want to commit to timeframes right now, but that is just beginning to be actively worked on. That was the entire intent behind reworking the anti-tank guided missile system. There was a component of that where we did want those missiles to just act and behave a little bit different and nuanced and have pros and cons, but the main effort there was to kind of untangle some of the tech in that underlying system so that it would enable us to have like heat-seeking lock-on anti-aircraft missiles.
Well, there you go, everybody. People who have been asking for CAS, helis, and more anti-air or more anti-armor. There you go. There's going to be more stuff coming in the future. Okay, so we are at the point where we've gone through all of our questions. Howitzer, Baron, thank you so much for getting through those with me, and everyone in the community, thank you so much for asking them. I did my best to feature as many of those questions from Discord as I possibly could. There were quite a few, and for the next Q&A, we will try doing things a little differently again, just as a little bit of A/B testing to find out where the questions are coming from and give everybody good opportunities to ask questions. However, if you're not in our Discord, you should absolutely join. The Discord recently got a bit of a change, so there are things like places where you can ask more questions. There's places where you can upload some of your squad clips to be featured on our Twitter/X page, and you can actually win skins for your weapons and so on just by submitting some fun squad goal clips. The Discord's going to get even better as well. We're going to be putting some more updates in there over the next coming weeks and months. And it'll also mean you have a great way to find out about these streams as well. Now, before we move on to some player requested questions from the chat that Baron and Howitzer are going to pull, I would like to invite everybody to potentially win some Clash weapon skins. I have 5 Clash weapon skin keys to give out, and I would like everyone to use this code that I'm putting in chat. Let's see, or this keyword. Is exclamation mark Clash. Let me see if this starts working.
Looks like it.
It looks like it's working. All right, and basically the way this is going to work, so everyone's got another minute or so to kind of put this in. The way I would like this to happen is I would like, if I pull your name, that you will message me here on the Join Squad Twitch channel. So you can use your Twitch whispers and you can message me here. Being funny. Give me just a second here, guys. Hold on. I may need to get you all to wait a moment. May have missed a step. Nope, maybe I didn't. All right, everyone continue to use your exclamation mark Clash. Everything is working as intended. If you typed it in once, type it in one more time just in case, but you only need to do it once. And I will give everybody another 30 seconds or so. And then what we're going to do is take a couple of questions from chat. And from there, We will take maybe another 10 minutes or so. Well, what are we at for time? We were at 1 hour. Yeah, we got about another 10 minutes or so. We'll try and grab some questions, see what happens.
Yeah, well, there's actually one that we didn't answer from the list that I was looking forward to,
Oh,
which was like talking about realism versus gameplay.
oh, my
And
apologies. I must have missed that one.
yeah, no worries. It's something that I addressed when I did that Moydog interview, but I think it'll be good to just talk about uh, so that we can flip it and refer to it later if necessary.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
but yeah, and it kind of alludes to something I was talking about earlier, which is how we balance that authenticity against the gameplay experience. And what's our approach when it comes to making something realistic versus non-realistic? So where the game lives is on that spectrum of milsim or simulation or something that's very realistic, and something that's more mainstream, like maybe something more like a battlefield. So because we live in between that space, we're always going to make decisions uh, that are weighing the value of something that's realistic and something that's good for the experience. And so what we try to focus on is providing an authentic experience. So suppression is the best example of that. So when you get shot at in real life, your vision doesn't go all blurry and you don't shake around necessarily with the weapon in your hand. But what happens in real life is you instinctually get down because you don't want to lose your life, and that's that's the experience you would get, the realistic experience. But we can't necessarily recreate that experience in the game unless we make it a very punishing outcome. So losing your life in real life is a very punishing outcome. That's why suppression is a thing, because you're afraid of losing your life. Very punishing outcome. We don't want to create that kind of punishing outcome in our game. So something you might see that in is like Tarkov or Arma, where there's a lot of stakes, there's a lot of punishment
Hmm.
behind the character losing their life. So instead, what we focus on is creating an authentic experience. So even though we can't make you experience that fear, and in that way, suppression doesn't make you get down and be really scared about losing your character's life, we try to incentivize or encourage the use of game mechanics like the blurriness and the shaking to get you to or sorry encourage the player, incentivize them to react in a way that would be authentic. So I'm suppressed, I'm not combat effective, I need to get down and get away. So even though it's not a realistic uh, thing that's happening to you, you're kind of mimicking the behavior that would be realistic. And that kind of goes into all of our design decisions. It's like, well, does how much ammo does this weapon have in real life? And it's like, okay, well, that's how much it has. But maybe that's too much. Maybe it just, if it's an automatic grenade launcher, it's way too many rounds. It can just mow down a whole field of infantry, and that is not good for the experience, right? So we'll make those kind of compromises throughout all our game design decisions. But yeah, that's just an interesting question I really want to get to.
Yeah, thank you. And that one came in from Aiden Hoff inside of Discord. It was a really nicely worded question. So I'm glad that we were able to spin back to that one. My apologies for missing it. Cool. So I've given everyone plenty of time to do the giveaway. So I'm just going to go ahead and roll it. You'll see your name pop up in chat. I'm only going to roll 5 times. If people don't message me about it, we'll save the codes for the next time. So we're just going to try and get everybody through this as fast as possible. All right. So our first winner is Cozy Camper. You should get tagged by Nightbot in there. I will need to have your message directly from you inside of Twitch. So your username in Twitch, you'll then tell me, oh, that's perfect, you're here. So the way this works is that you'll tell me your Discord username, and that's where I will send you the code later today. Hopefully in the next hour or so that you'll receive it. So you can just tell me inside of Twitch Whispers what your Discord username is, and then I will message you on Discord. So make sure your DMs are open. And next is Hen Kadoodle. Hen Kadoodle is number 2. And you're here as well. Wonderful. Mistborn PT. Mistborn PT is our 3rd winner. And then, oh, it was Hanky. I'm sorry, I'm reading that completely wrong. It was Hanky one. Well done. Awesome. And next is Vexation 01. That was number 4. And last one for our winners is Rengo O. All right, so all 5 of you have been tagged in chat. I've also said your names out loud, so hopefully you heard this. Hopefully you know then to send me a Twitch whisper on Twitch, and then you'll be able to send me your Discord username in there, which is where I will send you your skin. Sorry, Estrella, you didn't win. Apologies. All right. And if anyone doesn't claim those codes, I'll save those codes for the next stream and add them on, and we'll just, we'll roll those forward for the next one. All right, so gentlemen, do you guys want to see if we can grab some questions from chat? Chat, if you've got a question, feel free to fire it into the chat here at this point. And we'll see what we can answer.
I've seen a lot of people ask like what we're working on, and we've sort of answered it at various different points, but maybe it's worth it just, collating all of those answers into one area, or at least one sentence. It's like, obviously we announced the PMC, so we're working on PMC. We just talked about how we're working on that after action piece, that last kind of piece of the game loop. There's a couple of other features that we think will help first time players, I think, that are coming pretty soon too. Obviously CAS helis, MANPADS, those features actively being worked on. I saw a couple of questions about what the maps team are working on. I can say they're I guess a portion of them are looking at what UE5 means for maps, and sort of researching that, and a portion of them are actively looking at reworking old assets, which kind of fit into this re-optimizing a lot of different things. And we kind of want to kill two birds with one stone here, where the sort of art environment team are reworking assets, and the level design side of it are, replacing those assets in old maps, but also making new content, new maps with those new assets. And we're actively talking with Tactical Collective, the modding group, about France. And
that's exciting. I know plenty of people will be happy to hear that.
Yeah, when and all those questions we'll have to figure out, but we're actively talking to them about that, as well as the Bundeswehr mod. So we're talking to modders about what all this stuff means, and trying to work with them on getting you guys that content in the vanilla game. So there's a bunch of stuff that we're actively working on. There's some things that I didn't include there, but the majority of things that we're actively working on, I just kind of collated into one piece. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. There's something that keeps coming up in chat that I don't understand. I mean, I've been playing Squad on and off since about 2019, but I may be a little bit new to some of the memes. Who's Gary?
So Gary is a VBIED, vehicle for the insurgents, so a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Gary is on our list. Gary has not been forgotten.
Oh, interesting. Okay, there we go. Ooh, Nightbot is being a little bit funky. Hold on a second, guys. Nightbot should not be timing people out. One moment. Where are you? Disable. We're going to keep links disabled. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that, people who got timed out. It should only be a really short timeout. You shouldn't actually get, kicked or anything like that, but it should be fixed. All right, keep your questions coming in, and Howitzer and Baron are going to grab some if we see something we can answer.
Yeah, there's a couple I saw about invasion and RAS game modes. In the next update, we plan to standardize our invasion layers, similar to what we did with the RAS gameplay layers in 8.0. So just making them more consistent and hopefully getting more consistent results out of them. Looking at everything after 8.0, RAS is kind of hitting our goals for what we want in terms of flow and round duration. Sometimes people ask for more randomization. We've experimented with that in the past, but when you have true randomization on things like invasion and RAS game modes, and there's a big jump between the flags, we see that really slow down the pacing of the game, and it really interferes with the flow of a team's ability to kind of move from one objective to the other. And it also stagnates the game and causes a much higher average round time. So we're trying to dial that all in, and like we like to have randomization for replayability and variety, but we kind of draw the line where it starts creating difficulty with the pacing or the flow, or creates these stagnated games where two teams will just turtle on their respective flags and increase the round length disproportionately, and we can see that really clearly. So yeah, some standardization to invasion will be coming in the next update, and then we'll reassess where we are from there, and maybe continue to iterate if we don't feel like it's dialed in.
Wonderful. Thank you. I did see something about frame generation, and I think we mentioned that a little bit earlier. That's all about engine upgrades, and I think frame generation is something kind of linked to Unreal Engine 5. However, I'm not a programmer, but we are obviously looking at engine upgrades like we mentioned before, but we don't have an actual timeline on that. But that was something we talked about earlier on in the question answer section.
Yeah, this is the wrong lineup for really specific
Yeah.
tech questions. We can run another one with programmers and tech artists in here, and trust me, you guys who know Unreal Engine and know the tech side can get into all the nitty-gritty details of what you want. Yeah, but yeah, I don't think
Absolutely.
we're the wrong team to be answering the specific stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm hearing someone not saying bring Fuzzhead, and I'm thinking maybe Fuzzhead and maybe Squitters or someone like that might be wanting to come along. Jet?
Yeah, maybe crush depth, like if they want to ask specific questions about content or features. Yeah, I always love the comments, but Baron, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? I'm like, man, I'm not touching a lot of that stuff. That's other designers. But I mean, by all means, direct it towards me.
So yeah, we'll have more of these kinds of streams in the future. My current plan on the community side is to have the squad channel go live at least once a month, whether it's with a Q&A or not. I think once a month with a Q&A is maybe a little bit much, considering in a month's time we will probably have most of the same answers for you as we do currently right now. My plans were things like community spotlights. So some of the bigger or more popular servers I'll jump in and play on, and then you'll get to see some actual Siege gameplay, and you can yell at me and tell me the things I'm doing wrong. And you'll even be able to jump in and play with me. We'll do some mod spotlights where, yes, Luna, exactly. We'll jump in and play some specific mods. We'll maybe even have, I think there is a conversation in the community team about maybe seeing if we can get a dev play day where we get, like we would do every so often on a Friday, we try to get as many of the dev team together and we all play together, no matter what the level of experience is. So you might hear people giving very specific directions and then other people saying, what does this button do? And we feel like this might be kind of interesting for everybody to watch and being a part of, and even come and play with us. So the channel will be live. Please follow us. We will be back, and we want this channel to live on and give you guys more information as much as we can. So I think we've hit that kind of time where it's I'm eating into everybody's lunchtime, unfortunately. So we'll wrap it up here. Thank you everybody for your questions. I know there was so many that we maybe didn't get to. Hopefully in the next one we'll do that as well. But make sure you join Discord. Follow us on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it these days. Because these streams will always be announced in both Discord, on Twitter. You'll always be able to get more and more information first or fast inside of Discord, and you get to chat with all of us. So make sure you're in there. Come say hi. And that's it. Thank you very much, Baron and Howitzer, for joining me today for our return to streaming. Been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, it's fun.
Cheers.
Do it again.
Thanks, Siege.
All right, everybody. Take care. Have yourself a great day. Have a great weekend. And stay safe. Enjoy some squad. Bye, everyone.